previous speaker, let me straight ahead go ahead into the detection and the lineages. So everything that we do in genomics, especially a pathogen genome, we owe to this person, Anthony von Leeuwenhoek, who is otherwise known as the father of microbiology, and who invented what we call as a handheld microscope. And 300 years later, today we have a better microscope, that what we call as a genome microscope, where we could identify genomes of organisms even without a prior information of what we are essentially looking at. And all of genomics that we know today, and including genetic mutations, genetic lineages, genetic epidemiology, all owes to the developments that have happened, especially in the last couple of decades. Now, what is very constant with virus, and very especially coronaviruses and many other viruses and pathogens around us, is that they all mutate. The only difference is that they mutate at different rates. Now, for SARS coronavirus, it's estimated that the virus mutates approximately, accumulates one additional substitution once in every 7 to 10 days. And this essentially serves as a very interesting tool to go back in terms of time to do what we call as genetic epidemiology, or tracking the virus, because this is essentially a fingerprint for the virus in terms of where did it come from and what is its ancestor. Now, this has been observed very early in the pandemic, that the virus accumulates mutations at a very, very constant and fast rate. As you see here, from the first sample in December 26th to the third sample in February 27, the virus has accumulated multiple mutations already. Now, if you put the multiple mutations into a sort of a timeline, what you would see is, I said approximately around 7 to 10 days, the virus accumulates a substitution. So let's just, for the time's sake, consider substitutions are 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and 6, and so on and so forth. And you should always remember that the virus accumulates a mutation in a given genetic background. So the virus accumulates, say, for example, 2 mutations, we call it 1, 2. And at that point of time, if it diverges out into 2 different individuals or 2 different communities, you could have 2 other independent mutations. One is 1, 2, 3, given the same background of 1, 2, and the other one is 1, 2, 4, in the same background of 1, 2, and then they go back. Go back in the same fashion. Now, what is really important is, at some points of time, you would see disproportionate numbers of one combination of genetic mutation. So these combinations is what we call as haplotypes. And when we find a large number of a particular haplotype, then that essentially suggests an emergence. Now, emergence can essentially be because of 2 factors. The major factor being human, where you have super spreader events who can spread that particular lineage to a large number of individuals around him or her, and then therefore that would show a high preponderance in a time scale analysis. The second factor is, of course, a viral factor, where, for example, a virus genetic mutation could improve the survival or the fitness of the virus to transmit further, then of course that would also show an emergence. So what we essentially do in genomics is to do a timescale analysis, at a timescale survey, trying to capture each of these genetic combinations, or what we call as haplotypes, and assess what are the proportions across time. So if you had 2 time points, as shown here in yellow highlights, the first time point and the second time point, what we could understand is that the haplotype 1, 2, 4 had shown an emergence, and then therefore we could also use this information that the virus mutates at a constant rate to time the occurrence of this outbreak or an emergence event, and then therefore trace the outbreak or understand the causality of the outbreak. Now, all of this can also be drawn into a phylogenetic tree. A phylogenetic tree is built based on the similarities between organisms or genomes of organisms. In many senses, press writes about strains, so we should not call these as strains of SARS-CoV-2. SARS-CoV-2 by itself is a strain, very distinctly different from the MERS coronavirus and the SARS coronavirus. Now, what we should call is essentially genetic lineages, because each of these isolates are distinctly different by a few genetic mutations, at the max around 10 to 12 genetic mutations from each other, and probably a dozen or a couple of dozen genetic mutations different from the original SARS coronavirus 2 sequence, which was isolated from Wuhan. So in many times we should call them as clades or lineages or genetic variants, but never as strains of SARS coronavirus. Now, if you plot such maps for global scale data, thankfully we have over 1 million genome sequences of SARS coronavirus. Broadly, there are two genetic lineage nomenclatures which are available. One is provided by this database called NextStrain, and according to NextStrain, there are approximately around 12 major genetic lineages across the country, as you see here, colored in different colors. Now, there is also a similar nomenclature which is called as pangolin, which is widely followed by the UK counterparts, which could classify viruses in genetic lineages depending upon how they originated. Now, coming back to India, of the 8 odd genetic lineages which are widely available across the world, India early, I mean, this is a slide from 2020, had 6 of these genetic lineages. And apart from the 6, there was also a distinct genetic lineage by which we sort of identified from early March and April in India, which formed a very distinct cluster and which didn't have a very distinct map or a match anywhere else in the world. And what we know about this cluster is that it is a distinct cluster, and then therefore we gave this nomenclature of IA3I, I to signify that it is predominantly found in India, and A3I to signify that it is a bit divergent from the A3 cluster of the SARS coronavirus. Now, from mid to late 2020, very large numbers for this cluster was found in the northern part of India, especially in states like Delhi and adjoining states, and of course some parts of southern states like, for example, Telangana, for example, Andhra Pradesh, and so on and so forth. And eventually this sort of lineage died out over time and got replaced by the genetic lineage, the A2A, which has a D614G genetic mutations. By epidemiology, we know that this came out of a super spreader event and was spread across different states across the country. And of course, there are a few states like Kerala, which doesn't have the IA3I lineage ever during the course of the pandemic. Now, in India, according to the NextStrain lineages, we have 8 genetic lineages currently present in the country of the 12 odd genetic lineages which are present elsewhere. And going by the pangolin classification, of course, there are many more genetic lineages. I mean, because the nomenclature system or the nomenclature schema between the pangolin and the NextStrain databases are different. But of course, on the same timelines, each isolate can be given either of the nomenclatures. Now, given almost half of the sequences which are available today in public domain was done from the UK Genome Consortium, it is just natural that the world now follows the pangolin nomenclature system, and that is essentially what I'm also going to follow in my future slides. Now, just because there is a lot of interest very recently in what we call a lot of tuples, including a double, triple, quadruple, I don't know, all kinds of genetic mutations. In reality and in scientific parlance, we should not really call them as double or triple or quadruple, because that is not scientific, that has no reasoning, and of course it causes more confusion than it is supposed to solve. So the right scientific nomenclature for this particular lineage is what we call as B1.617. That essentially means that it is a sublineage of the B1 superlineage, and 617 essentially denotes a serial order of the lineage in terms of the discovery of the lineage. Now, what is B617? Now, B617 was essentially identified because there is a cluster of genomes which has 2 distinct genetic mutations which are shared between them, not just 2, but 2 mutations with some functional relevance. This is E484Q and L452R. And these 2 genetic mutations was found in almost 90% of the isolates at the time of discovery for this particular lineage. Now, E484Q and L452R in combination is not found exclusively in this particular lineage. The other 2 lineages in some ways, which also has this combination occurring at least in small proportions. And today we know that they are also part of lineages which have previously been assigned from Sweden as well as from the United States. But far and large, the largest cluster is what we call as the B617. Most of the samples have come out of India, but of course, these isolates are found in many other countries across the world. Now, the characteristic feature of this lineage is it is marked or defined by around 15 genetic mutations, out of which 6 of them are in the spike protein, and including the 2 genetic mutations which I sort of mentioned, E484Q and L452R, which are of functional importance. Now, what we call as functional importance are 2 things. One, increased infectivity in terms of better efficiency to bind to the spike protein, and second, what we call as antibody or immune escape. Now, E484Q and L452R, both of them show antibody escape property, and L452R also shows an increased infectivity property individually. Of course, we cannot really predict what happens in combinations, but it is just natural to extrapolate individual findings to combinations of mutations. Now, in terms of immune escape, this is something that is very, very emerging thanks to indiscrete use of many immunological agents, including convalescent plasma therapy. Now we have a lot of emergent immune escape mutations, and there is probably one only database that we maintain across the world collecting evidence on immune escape mutations. Now, for this particular genetic lineage 617, both these mutations E484Q and L452R map to the receptor binding domain of the SARS coronavirus spike protein. And the receptor binding domain is essentially the region of the protein which binds to the ACE2 receptor. So, in other words, the virus has an Achilles heel in the sense that the same interface that it sort of uses to bind to the ACE2 receptor is the same interface that is also exposed out, and therefore the targets for antibodies, either monoclonal antibodies that humans have created or antibodies which are polyclonal in nature, which is developed as part of the immune response to infection or immune response to vaccines. So the virus has only limited possibilities to mutate this site without losing significant efficacy in binding to the ACE2 receptor. Now, what is known about L452R is also that it can actually bind much more effectively to this ACE2 receptor, almost half of the efficiency of the 501Y, which is part of the UK lineage. Now, of course, I'm sure I cannot cover everything in here, but for curious people, there is also a database that we have sort of maintained, which looks at the frequency of these genetic mutations in all the isolates, around 10,000 odd genetic isolates, sequenced from across India, sequenced as part of INSACOG program, as well as many other programs. I think I'll stop there and take questions.